Have you ever felt the unsettling sensation that the person you present to the world isn't entirely you? That the smile you offer, the opinions you voice, the very choices you make are subtly calibrated not by an inner compass, but by the perceived expectations or potential judgments of others? Consider this. How much of your daily energy is spent anticipating reactions, curating appearances, or seeking affirmation from sources outside yourself? Is it a fleeting thought, a minor adjustment, or a pervasive undercurrent dictating the flow of your life? Now ask yourself a harder question. What would be left if you stripped away all the layers added to please, to impress, to belong? Would there be a solid core or a disquieting void? What if I told you that the relentless pursuit of external validation isn't just a harmless habit, but a subtle, insidious form of self-abandonment, a slow erosion of your authentic being, traded for the fleeting comfort of approval? This isn't hyperbole. It's a profound psychological reality. It suggests that many of us are living lives not truly our own, but reflections in the eyes of others, constantly adjusting our angle to catch the most favorable light. It implies that the very foundation of our self-worth is often built on shifting sands, the volatile opinions of a world that is inherently indifferent to our deepest truth. This realization is uncomfortable, perhaps even frightening, because it challenges the very structure of how we've learned to navigate social reality. But facing this truth, unflinchingly and with courage, is the first necessary step toward reclaiming something infinitely more valuable than any external praise: the unshakable ground of being truly, authentically you. Prepare yourself, because we are about to embark on a journey to understand the invisible chains that bind us and the radical path to breaking free. The concept we must confront is the insidious phenomenon of the externally validated self, a construct built not from intrinsic values and desires, but from the reflection seen in the eyes of others. This isn't merely vanity or a desire for popularity. It's a deeply ingrained psychological pattern where one's sense of worth, identity, and even reality becomes primarily dependent on external approval, recognition, or acceptance. At its core, this dynamic taps into fundamental human needs for belonging and connection, needs that are essential for survival and well-being. However, when the source of validation shifts predominantly outside the self, a critical imbalance occurs. Psychologically, this can be understood through principles related to attachment theory and social learning. Early experiences often teach us that certain behaviors elicit approval, while others lead to withdrawal or disapproval. We learn to adapt, to perform, to seek external cues for our own value. Over time, this external referencing becomes habitual, overriding the quieter signals from within: our intuition, our genuine interests, our internal sense of right and wrong. Instead of acting from a place of internal congruence, we act from a place of anticipated reaction. This creates a self that is reactive, malleable, and fundamentally unstable, as it is subject to the ever-changing tides of external opinion. In our current era, particularly within the digital landscape, this concept is not just relevant, but it is critically urgent. Social media platforms, designed with algorithms that reward engagement through likes, shares, and comments, have created environments that are hyper-optimized for cultivating the externally validated self. Every post, every curated image, every carefully worded comment becomes a bid for external affirmation. The constant feedback loop trains us to prioritize external metrics over internal feelings. We see filtered realities, compare our unedited lives to others' highlight reels, and internalize the pressure to perform a version of ourselves that is palatable, popular, or perfect according to external standards. Information overload further exacerbates this, presenting a cacophony of voices, opinions, and trends, making it harder to hear our own inner voice amidst the noise. The digital age hasn't invented the need for external validation, but it has weaponized it, creating a pervasive, always-on performance stage where the pressure to conform and seek approval is relentless and often subconscious. This makes understanding and resisting the pull of the externally validated self more crucial now than perhaps ever before. Delving deeper, the externally validated self operates on a subtle duality. On the surface, it might appear as confidence, popularity, or success, as these are often the very things external validation rewards. Yet beneath this veneer lies a profound insecurity. The self built on external approval is inherently fragile because its foundation is external and uncontrollable. When the approval is withdrawn, the self-worth plummets. When opinions change, the identity shifts. This creates a constant state of anxiety, a fear of exposure, a fear of disapproval, a fear of not measuring up. Most people miss this hidden truth. The most outwardly confident, those who seem to effortlessly garner praise, might be the most deeply trapped. Their entire identity precariously balanced on the opinions of others. They become expert chameleons, adapting their colors to fit any environment but losing sight of their true hue. They confuse the reflection for the source, believing the external praise creates their worth, rather than recognizing that true worth is inherent and independent of external judgment. This constant performance is exhausting, leaving little energy for genuine self-exploration or pursuing passions that lack external fanfare. Consider the metaphor of a ship navigating a vast ocean. The ship represents your life, your journey. The internal compass represents your authentic self, your values, your intuition, your deepest desires, guiding you towards destinations that hold genuine meaning for you. The rudder represents your agency, your ability to steer the ship according to that internal compass. Now imagine instead of using the compass and rudder, the ship is guided solely by the lights it sees on distant shores. The lighthouses, the cityscapes, the flares from other vessels. These lights represent external validation, the praise, the recognition, the expectations of others. The ship constantly adjusts its course not based on its own destination, but on which light seems brightest or most appealing at any given moment. It might zigzag erratically across the ocean, chasing one light, then another, never settling on a consistent direction. The crew, your internal resources, your energy, is exhausted by the constant reactive course corrections. The ship's hold, your inner world, remains empty because it never reaches a port chosen for its own intrinsic value. The captain, your consciousness, is so focused on the external lights that they forget how to read their own charts or trust their own instruments. The ship might appear busy, constantly moving, perhaps even impressive from a distance as it darts towards various lights, but it lacks purpose, it lacks direction, and it is utterly dependent on the existence and visibility of external signals. If the lights go out, the ship is lost, adrift, without the internal knowledge or tools to navigate on its own. This is the state of the externally validated self, constantly steered by external signals, lacking an internal compass, and ultimately never truly arriving anywhere of its own choosing. The ship is not sailing its own journey, it is merely reacting to the perceived journeys of others. The psychological mechanism underpinning the externally validated self is complex, involving a feedback loop between behavior, social response, and internalized self-perception. It often begins in formative years when we learn that conforming to certain expectations brings love, safety, or acceptance, while deviating can lead to criticism or rejection. This creates a deep-seated association between external approval and feeling good enough or safe. As we mature, this pattern becomes automated. When faced with a choice or a situation, the brain quickly scans for potential external reactions before consulting internal values. This is reinforced by the brain's reward system. Positive external feedback, a compliment, a like, a nod of agreement, triggers a release of dopamine, creating a pleasurable sensation that reinforces the behavior that elicited it. Conversely, negative feedback or the absence of positive feedback can feel like a threat, triggering anxiety or a sense of inadequacy. This constant seeking of the reward and avoidance of the threat trains the individual to prioritize external signals. Over time, the internal voice, intuition, genuine preferences, core values, becomes quieter, drowned out by the louder, more urgent demands of the external world. The individual essentially outsources their sense of worth, placing it in the hands of others, leading to a precarious emotional state dependent on the unpredictable nature of social interaction.
Let's consider the story of Elias. From a young age, Elias was praised for being agreeable, for excelling in subjects his parents valued, and for fitting in seamlessly with his peers. He learned that his quiet nature and academic achievements earned him approval, while expressing dissenting opinions or pursuing his passion for abstract art were met with polite indifference or subtle discouragement. Elias grew into a man who was outwardly successful, a respected engineer, well-liked by colleagues, and seemingly content. Yet internally, Elias felt a persistent, gnawing emptiness. He excelled at his job, but found no joy in it. It was merely a continuation of doing what he knew would be approved of. His relationships were pleasant, but lacked depth, as he rarely revealed his true thoughts or feelings, fearing they wouldn't be accepted. He spent his evenings scrolling through social media, comparing his life to others, feeling inadequate despite his achievements. The abstract art supplies he bought years ago remained untouched in his closet. Elias was living a life that looked good on paper, a life built entirely on meeting external expectations, but it wasn't his own. He was a master of performance, but the audience he was playing for was everyone but himself. Have you ever felt that same disconnect, a sense that the life you're living is someone else's script? The devastating long-term consequence for Elias was a profound identity crisis in his late 40s. He realized he didn't know who he was without the external markers of success and approval. The life he had meticulously constructed felt hollow, a beautiful cage built by the opinions of others, leaving him feeling lost and deeply regretful for the decades spent neglecting his own soul. Then there is the case of Clara. Clara was a vibrant, opinionated young woman in college, passionate about social justice and expressing herself through her unique style. However, as she entered the professional world and navigated dating, she began to receive subtle and not so subtle feedback. Her strong opinions were sometimes labeled difficult, her style unprofessional, her passion too intense. Wanting to be liked, to be seen as easy to get along with, and to find a partner, Clara began to file down her edges. She softened her opinions, adopted a more conventional wardrobe, and learned to laugh at jokes she didn't find funny. She became a master of mirroring, adapting her personality to fit the person she was with. With her colleagues, she was agreeable and deferential. With her friends, she adopted their interests and slang. On dates, she presented a version of herself she thought the other person wanted to see. Clara became popular, had many acquaintances, and eventually found a partner who seemed to adore the person she presented. But in the quiet moments alone, Clara felt like a ghost in her own life. She no longer knew what she truly believed or what she genuinely enjoyed. The reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger. Do you ever find yourself changing who you are depending on who you're with, losing track of your own voice in the process? The long-term cost for Clara was a deep sense of isolation, even when surrounded by people. The relationships she built were based on a manufactured persona, leading to a profound loneliness, where she felt unseen and unknown, trapped by the very adaptability that had initially brought her acceptance. Finally, consider Ben, whose struggle played out primarily online. Ben was a talented amateur photographer, finding genuine joy in capturing the beauty of the world around him. Initially, he shared his photos online to connect with other enthusiasts. But as his follower count grew, Ben became increasingly focused on likes and comments. He noticed that photos of himself, even if poorly composed, garnered more attention than his best landscape shots. He started curating his feed, posting only images that fit a popular aesthetic, using filters to perfect his appearance, and crafting captions designed to be relatable and boost engagement. His photography shifted from an art form he loved to a tool for validation. He spent hours each day monitoring his metrics, feeling a rush of dopamine with each notification and a pang of anxiety if a post didn't perform well. His real-life interactions began to feel dull compared to the instant gratification of online approval. He started to believe the curated version of himself was the only one worth presenting, even to friends and family. He lived in a state of constant performance, comparing his engagement to others, feeling perpetually inadequate. Have you ever felt the pressure to present a perfect, filtered version of yourself online and felt the hollowness when that performance ends? The long-term consequence for Ben was a severe disconnect from reality and a crippling dependence on external validation. His self-worth became inextricably tied to his online metrics, leading to anxiety, depression, and a complete loss of the genuine passion that initially drew him to photography, leaving him feeling like a brand rather than a person.
These stories, though distinct, share a common thread: the immense, often hidden cost of building a self on the unstable foundation of external validation. It costs you your authenticity, forcing you into a performance that is exhausting and ultimately unfulfilling. It costs you your inner peace, subjecting you to the volatile whims of others' opinions. It costs you genuine connection, as relationships built on a false self can never truly thrive. It costs you your potential, diverting energy away from pursuing what genuinely lights you up towards chasing fleeting approval. It costs you your sovereignty, making you a slave to external forces rather than the master of your own life. The price is nothing less than the erosion of your soul, leaving behind a hollow echo where a vibrant, unique individual should be. Breaking free from the prison of external validation is not a simple process. It is a difficult, often painful, but ultimately necessary journey inward. It requires dismantling years, perhaps decades, of ingrained patterns and rebuilding your sense of self from the ground up, based on an internal foundation. This is where true freedom lies, not in the absence of external opinions, which is impossible, but in the liberation from their control over your sense of worth and your actions. True strength, in this context, is not the ability to command external respect, but the quiet, unwavering resolve to live in accordance with your own truth, regardless of external judgment. It is the courage to be disliked for who you are, rather than loved for who you are not. The path to transformation begins with radical self-observation. What is it? It is the practice of becoming a non-judgmental witness to your own thoughts, feelings, and motivations, specifically observing the moments where you are seeking external approval or reacting to perceived disapproval. Why is this crucial? Because you cannot change a pattern you are not aware of. This practice helps you identify the triggers, the internal dialogue, and the behaviors associated with your reliance on external validation. It creates a necessary distance between you and the automatic reaction, allowing you to see the mechanism at work without immediately being swept up in it. How do you practice this? Start with mindful awareness throughout your day. When you feel a pang of anxiety before posting something online or a surge of pleasure from a compliment, pause and notice it. Ask yourself, what was I hoping for with this action? What feeling arose from this response? Journaling can be incredibly powerful here, writing down specific instances where you felt driven by external concerns. Simply observe without labeling it good or bad. Challenges you will face include denial, like, I don't do that, discomfort with seeing your own patterns, and the difficulty of maintaining awareness in the rush of daily life. But persistence builds this crucial self-awareness, the first step in reclaiming your agency.
Next, you must calibrate your inner compass. What does this mean? It's the process of identifying and connecting with your core values, your intrinsic motivations, and your genuine interests, independent of what others think or expect. Why is this essential? Because your inner compass provides the alternative navigation system to external validation. It gives you an internal reference point, a stable source of direction and worth that cannot be taken away by external circumstances. It shifts your focus from what will they think to what truly matters to me. How do you calibrate it? Engage in exercises that help you clarify your values. What principles are non-negotiable for you? Reflect on moments in your life when you felt most alive, most engaged, most authentically yourself. What were you doing? What needs were being met? Explore activities you are drawn to purely for the joy of doing them, without any need for external recognition. This is about rediscovering or defining your internal criteria for a life well lived. Challenges include the confusion that arises when you realize you don't know what your true values are. The fear of discovering your genuine desires conflict with your current life, and the difficulty of distinguishing between true passion and interests you adopted to fit in. Finally, you must engage in the practice of deliberate disapproval. What is this radical step? It is consciously choosing to act in accordance with your newly calibrated inner compass, even when you anticipate or actually receive external disapproval, criticism, or lack of validation. Why is this necessary? Because awareness and internal clarity are not enough. You must actively train yourself to tolerate the discomfort of external judgment and demonstrate to yourself that you can survive and even thrive without constant approval. This practice rewires the brain's association between external disapproval and threat. How do you practice this? Start small. Express a genuine opinion in a low-stakes conversation that might differ from the group consensus. Wear something you love but isn't trendy. Say no to a request that doesn't align with your values, even if it causes mild disappointment. Share a creative project online that you made for yourself without optimizing it for likes. Gradually increase the stakes. Each act of choosing your internal truth over external approval strengthens your inner foundation. Challenges you will face include intense anxiety, fear of rejection or abandonment, actual criticism or misunderstanding from others, and the temptation to retreat back to the safety of conformity. Understand that the discomfort you will feel during this process, the anxiety when you express a dissenting opinion, the fear when you choose your own path, the pang of disappointment when you don't receive the validation you once craved, these are not signs that you are doing something wrong. They are signals that you are breaking free. They are the friction of shedding old skin, the growing pains of building a self that is resilient because its strength comes from within. Embrace this pain. It is the necessary cost of reclaiming your sovereignty. We have explored the subtle tyranny of living for external validation, the psychological mechanisms that trap us, and the devastating cost to our authentic selves. We have also illuminated the challenging but liberating path forward, a path of radical self-observation, calibrating your inner compass, and practicing deliberate disapproval. The choice now lies before you, stark and undeniable. Continue to live as a reflection in the eyes of others, forever seeking approval on shifting sands, or embark on the difficult, courageous journey inward to build a self rooted in your own truth, resilient and whole. Who are you truly living for?